Well, let's do it. So, last weekend, between July 9th and July 11th, Heritage Auctions hosted its first ever video game only signature auction. I think it goes without saying that this auction was a huge success and that we will be having one again in the future. Before we get into any of the breakdowns on the Marios or the Zeldas of this auction, first I just want to give a little bit of a macro overview of this auction. In total, there were 497 unique lots in this auction, and those sold for a grand total price of $8,471,183. If we take the total number of lots, that means an average price per game of about $17,000, which is insane, right? But let's go ahead and remove the top two sales from that. So if we just get rid of the Mario 64 for $1.5 million and the Zelda for $870,000, which actually adds up to $2.43 million, or roughly 29% of the total value of this auction. But if we remove those two games from the equation, then the average price per game becomes $12,200, which is still actually insane. Yeah, that's insane. There were 25 total games that sold for over $50,000. Of those, 10 games sold for over $100,000. Of all of the games that sold for $50,000, we have NES leading the charge by a lot with 11 games, and Sega barely represented with only a single game. And if you don't know, prior to this auction, the most expensive video game ever sold was this fourth print of Super Mario Bros. That sold for $660,000, which was an impressive sale at the time. But that was first eclipsed on the Friday session, where a second print Legend of Zelda sold for $870,000, and then that sale was again passed on the Sunday session, where a Super Mario 64, now famously, sold for $1.56 million. And that's the state of the hobby right now. There are plenty of games worth over $50,000, there are lots of games worth over $100,000, and the pinnacle of the hobby is Super Mario 64. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this entire auction here, and now we're going to get into some more micro level analysis of the actual games that sold. Alright, let's start by talking about the one everyone wants to hear about, everyone cares about, the $1.5 million Super Mario 64. So, what makes this game special? This Mario 64 is from the first production of the game, which in Mario 64 terms just means it's not a player's choice version. There are no small nuanced variations that are tracked or known about. So getting a first print of this game is so easy compared to anything like the Legend of Zelda NES or Mario Bros NES. This game really has no difficulty towards getting a first print. The other thing that matters is it is a WATA 9.8 A++, which is theoretically the best possible grade you can hope to achieve when you grade a game. Yes, their scale does go up to 10.0, but for all intents and purposes, 9.8 is what you will get, given that the 10 is extremely rare to ever be given out to any game. So, that's it. We have a first production of Super Mario 64, perfect condition, and the question everyone is dying to know, do I think it's worth $1.5 million? Absolutely not. I do not think this sale is justified or reasonable for this game at this time. Nor do I think that this sale will be replicated on an equal grade of this game anytime soon. It's very important to note that at this specific time, at this auction, this game went crazy. It does not mean that we're going to see it again in the future. It does not mean that this is now the going rate for a perfect copy. It means that in this isolated auction, it happened to go for $1.5 million. So in this video, I don't want to get into all the fraud and all the manipulation and anything like that. Any theories, any conspiracies, I don't want to cover stuff like that. There are already enough videos out there if you want to watch something like that. What I'm going to try to do in this video is establish what we actually know about this item, what we know about its rarity, its price, and how many might exist in the future. I want to try and break it down and justify this sale price as best as we can. We do know who consigned this game, and he is confirming that he is going to be paid for this sale. So whoever spent the $1.5 million, be it WATA themselves, Heritage themselves, money laundering, the money is real and is going to be transferred to the person who sold this game. So let's just start with looking up comparative sales, right? What has Super Mario 64 sold for in the past? And on Heritage auctions, what we've seen in the past is back in January, we've seen a 9.4 A+ sell for $38,000, which is a far cry from 1.5 million, but 9.4 A+ also isn't at all comparable to a 9.8 A++. So really, this acts as a non-data point. There is no comparative analysis in saying that a 9.4 A+ sold for this much, therefore the 9.8 A++ should sell for this much. The 9.8 A++ could easily be a multiple of 10, 20 times the price of the 9.4. That wouldn't be surprising at all. What we also do know is that back in January, February, there were community members holding high-grade Super Mario 64s who were being offered around 100,000 for them. And these data points came out after this auction. These people holding these items have no real incentive to lie. There was already the $1.5 million sale. If they wanted to lie about offers they received, they would pick a lot higher of a number than 100,000. But that's back in January, where 100,000 for a video game was still impressive. So if multiple people are out there wanting this game for $100,000, you can take from that data that if it goes to open auction, maybe it'll sell for 175, 250, 300, right? Maybe a bidding war happens. It's clear there was a bidding war that took place on this item, which is why anyone who holds one now and is gonna put it up for a buy it now at $1 million, it's just not gonna happen. What I also want to talk about with this sale is the actual rarity of getting a 9.8 A++ on this game. I see a lot of videos and articles saying Super Mario 64 sold millions of copies. Clearly it's not a rare game. And while they are not wrong, getting this game in perfect condition is still rare. So what I have here with me is the population report on Super Mario 64 provided by VGA back in January 2016. That's right, if you email VGA, they will provide you a population report. It's a stupid system, it's a bad system, but they were willing to give you numbers. I don't know if they still respond to requests today. What I want to do with this pop report is show that yes, the game itself in sealed form is not something that will be considered rare moving forward. There are going to be several hundred copies most likely. In January 2016, you can see that there were already 62 copies graded with VGA. This was before the big boom of WATA, this was before Heritage, this is before everyone decided to grade their video games. What I do want to look at though, and as I bring this up, is the U95 Plus, the U95, and the 95. These are the ones that have the highest likelihood of crossing over to a 9.8 A++. And what you can see is that back in 2016, if you were looking to buy one in perfect condition, you had 7 copies to choose from that were already graded. So VGA has been grading games since about 2008-ish. If you know the exact year they started, please do put it below. So with this 2016 pop report, we're working off 8 years of people submitting video games. Another thing to note is that back in the year 2016, people were only submitting the best of the best to VGA. There was no incentive to grade a VGA 80 or a VGA 70. Heaven forbid a VGA 60, you'd be laughed out of the room. So with this census rate here, we are seeing the best of the best that people had in their personal collections that they submitted to VGA. And of the best, we still ended up with 7 theoretical perfect copies. So let's push this data another 5 years. Let's say all of these numbers double from where we're at, right? We get to double the amount of theoretical copies now. Let's say we even triple the amount of theoretical perfect Mario 64s that are going to get graded. We would end up with a population of around 20 9.8 A++ copies of Super Mario 64. And I think that's honestly being a little bit generous. If you've never graded N64 before, the boxes crease incredibly easy, making it very hard to get the perfect grade. And no, there is no warehouse with Super Mario 64 sitting there that hasn't been found yet. We are already 25 years from the release of Mario 64. The odds of there being a warehouse find of first print copies of this game is basically zero. It's a non-risk. It is not something you should hope for. It is not something you should worry about if you are the buyer. Especially with a player's choice release existing. If there was going to be a warehouse find or massive excess unused stock of this game, you're gonna get a player's choice copy. So I feel extremely confident that there will not be some excess flood of stock of this game. There will not be a plethora of 9.8 copies of this or VGA 95, so it will have an inherent low population. And that's about where my defense ends. I think with Super Mario 64, we will have hundreds of sealed copies in general, and we'll have 20 to 30 perfect copies. So if I told you that Super Mario 64 in this condition might have 20 copies ever in the future, that's a pretty rare item. Is it $1.56 million rare right now? No, I don't believe it is. But the conversations about it not being rare at all, or warehouse finds are coming, or it's one of the most common games on N64, it is not that easy, and it never will be that easy to get a 9.8 A++. It doesn't matter if you don't care about the theoretical perfect, or you don't care about the high grade premium. There are people in this world with a lot of money who do care about this stuff. And at this specific auction, there were people who felt like spending over $1 million on Mario 64. Some people will think it's the pinnacle of the hobby, some people won't. It's Mario 64. It's a great game, it's an iconic game. Say what you will about it, right? 1.5 million. Alright, that was an absolute mouthful. Let's talk about this loser game now that only sold for 870,000. So, The Legend of Zelda NES WATA 9.0A, the second print of this game. How do we know it's a second print? We look down here, there is no Rev A in this bottom corner, and after the word system, there's a little R here in a circle. That's how we know it's a second print. And you might say, wait, a second print sold for $870,000? Well, the odds of you getting a first print are basically zero. There are two confirmed to exist, and both are in private collections. So for all intents and purposes, the best thing you are ever going to get is this second print right here. Will that stand the test of time? Maybe, maybe not. But the odds of there ever being more of these brought to the market is extremely rare due to the game being the second print of this game. If you were to ever find more Legend of Zeldas, you're far more likely to find the late oval print than you are finding any of the round seal revisions of this game. Honestly, when this sold for $870,000, I expected this to stay as the record for the most expensive video game. All I can really say about this sale is that this is far more justified, reasonable, and understandable to myself than the Mario 64 is. I don't have a tough time believing this. I was already estimating somewhere in the $500,000 range. So yeah, it sold more than the $500,000 I was thinking, but we're still in that reasonable range for this title. On the Mario 64, I was personally estimating somewhere in the $300,000 range. So like, you can see how my expectations to reality are a lot more skewed on the Mario 64 than it was with this Zelda. But hey, amazing franchise, amazing game overall, an amazing price. I'm really excited to see what this one does in the future because I think this one is far more replicable than the Mario 64 is. So after the Mario and after the Zelda and all of the headlines, we get into Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo becoming the most expensive Super Nintendo game by a lot at $360,000. And if you're wondering why the hell did Super Mario World sell for that much, it's one of the most common games on the Super Nintendo. Yes, as a cartridge, it is extremely common because it was a pack-in with the console. But because it was a pack-in with the console, that means that no one needed to buy the standalone version of the game. So even finding this game complete in box has always cost a large premium versus a lot of other Super Nintendo games. And then you add on that it is Mario and one of the most in-demand Super Nintendo games, and you end up with the factory sealed version selling for $360,000. Once again, I feel this price is reasonable. It is possible that a 9.8 A++ Super Mario World doesn't exist. This game in any form, factory sealed, is exceedingly hard to find. The total pop count on Super Mario World could be half that of Mario 64. It would not surprise me in the future at all if this game does exceed the sale of Super Mario 64, if this is the more expensive game, just due to how much more rarity there actually is with the game. We will very likely need population reports and a lot more data in the market to ever see that kind of shift take place. But that's my thoughts on that and this sale. $360,000 Super Mario World, most expensive Super Nintendo game, and it will probably stay that way unless we see maybe a 9.8 A++ Link to the Past, or I don't know. Put in the comments below what game you think might outsell Super Mario World. The Mario Bros here on NES, only $228,000, but this is a 3-screw no Rev A print. Though the print itself is pretty uncommon, it does not have the hang tab, which is what most serious collectors are at least looking for when buying a hard-to-find variation of this game. What we can say though is that this one sold for $228,000. So remember that sticker seal that sold for like $115,000 way back in 2019? That is almost undoubtedly a $1 million video game right now. It might even be a $2 million video game right now. So don't look at this Mario Bros sale and say, oh my god, Mario 64 is worth more than Mario Bros. No, it's not. Super Mario Bros is very revision dependent, and unfortunately a no Rev A 3-screw just isn't that demanded. Yes, it's in great condition. Yes, it is still a circle seal, but no, it does not have a hang tab. So here again is why I have such a tough time with the Mario 64 sale, and maybe this is just my own bias, but here's a perfect condition original print of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. It is not the collector's edition, it is just the regular edition, and it only sold for $228,000. Now maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm completely wrong with this, but in my mind, Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time are not that different. At least not 7 or 8 times price difference, right? I'm sure there are plenty of people who would say the best game on Nintendo 64 is Ocarina of Time, right? There's people who would say that. I would say that. I would put this game above Mario 64 in a heartbeat. Now, even though the regular print of Ocarina of Time is thought to be harder to grade and harder to find than the collector's edition, I would expect a 9.8 A++ collector's edition to outsell the regular print, just because of demand, right? Everyone wants a collector's edition, myself included. But still, seeing this sell for 7 times less than Mario 64 only further emphasizes why the Mario 64 sale just doesn't seem justified at this time. Perhaps surprisingly, we also saw Final Fantasy 9.8 A++ sell for $204,000. This is another game where I don't think there are known variants on this game, so finding the first print is easier because you can technically find any print of the game. But still, the start of the Final Fantasy franchise, that is an incredibly iconic series. I personally love the Final Fantasy series myself. $204,000... From what I remember from my own experiences, it was never the rarest of games, and due to the box being stuffed with extra stuff, it does maintain its condition better than some other NES games, but that's not to say that 9.8 A++ is going to be super common on this game in the future, but I don't know if it will be as low of a population count as some other iconic games on the system. And of course, for the old school guys, we have to talk about the Nintendo World Championship Gray Cart 8.0 condition selling for only $180,000, which if you were collecting back in, say, 2012, this was the absolute peak of collecting, the absolute grail. There was nothing better than the Nintendo World Championships Gray, except for the Nintendo World Championships Gold. So when you see now that the Final Fantasy or a Super Mario World or a Mario 64 is selling for multiples the Nintendo World Champion, it's just a bit funny to think about and crazy to see the shift in demand that has taken place in the hobby. Back then, you never would have thought you'd see one of these sell for $180,000, but you also never would have thought you'd see it getting outsold by so many other games. I would love to own one of these. It still is a true grail piece amongst collectors and enthusiasts, but this mainstream speculator investing crowd really isn't seeing it the same way as it was way back when it was more just a tight-knit group of collectors. And that might completely change in the future. We might go back to a world where people value the Nintendo World Championships for its history and provenance more than having a perfect condition of a game that isn't actually all that rare, but we'll see what happens with that. That's all just speculation, and that's part of the game that's played, right? This Mario Bros. Arcade here is a hang tab version, 9.0 A+, and sold for $156,000. Now, if this was not a hang tab version, you could expect this to sell for maybe a third of the price, honestly. Sticking with NES here, we have a Contra 9.8 A+, sell for $150,000. Contra is a premier NES title. There are tons of Contra fans everywhere. This is an iconic series. I personally prefer Super C versus Contra, but the rarity between the two games isn't even close. Contra in any condition on the NES has always been expensive and sought after and pretty hard to find, so I understand why this one is joining the upper echelon of all games everywhere. So here we go again, sticking with revisions. This is a 9.6 A+ Mario Bros, right? But you can see down here that this is the oval revision of this game. This is a late print of Super Mario Bros. And you can see that even in nicer condition, it did not sell for as much as the worst condition game, but this one has the circle seal down here, which is another major revision that matters a lot. Super Smash Bros. N64. This is only a 9.4 A++, and it sold for $144,000. So if we were to take this to a 9.8 A++, the sky is the limit on this game. This could be a $500,000 title. This could be a $1 million game. And it's kind of funny because I actually want to be joking about this being a $1 million game. But at this point, I just don't know if that's a joke. That's insane. Finally, getting away from Nintendo stuff in this auction, we have a 9.8 A+ Final Fantasy VII that sold for $144,000. And this was also an extreme sale because FF7 up to this point had never even flirted with anything like this. And FF7, even in perfect condition, is going to have much higher population count than a lot of the cardboard games. And this is the third printing of the game, which actually corrected the misprint. Now, what I do know is that the third print of this game likely is the most rare version of it. However, far more people are going to want the realistic violence first print or the misprint I version. If you don't know, I did a video about them. Feel free to watch it. It goes over the revisions and the print runs for Final Fantasy VII Black Label. If you want to go ahead and make that there were millions of games sold on Mario 64 argument, that gets even more amplified with Final Fantasy VII. As a factory sealed game, it actually isn't that rare at all. There's a lot of demand for it, so it's always been relatively expensive, but there are a lot of copies floating around. I'm saying this over and over in the video, but obviously getting the perfect condition copy will lead to a lower population count overall, but I just don't feel like this game is actually going to be that rare and is going to need a lot of sustained demand for perfect copies for this type of pricing to hold itself. And that is not to shit on Final Fantasy VII in any way. I think this is an amazing game, an amazing grail copy for PlayStation collectors. I just do worry about the amount of supply that might exist. And rounding out the 100K games, we have Tomb Raider on PlayStation 9.4A. This is another game that would absolutely explode in perfect condition Edition. Pokemon Red Sandshrew version here for $132,000, becoming the most expensive Pokemon game ever sold at open auction. Super Mario Bros. 3 Left Bros, 9.4 but only a B seal, which is why we only saw it sell for $120,000. Remember, Super Mario Bros. 3 Left Bros used to be the most expensive game sold at $156,000. Remember when that was exciting? $156,000 was the record for the most expensive video game? Let's not forget that this sale was less than a year ago. So moving back into Super Nintendo here, we actually see Final Fantasy 3 in 9.4 A+ selling for $96,000. Very strong. Final Fantasy 3 has always been seen as a Super Nintendo grail. And we also have Zelda Link to the Past selling for $96,000, and it is only a 9.2 A+ of this game, which is actually relatively low compared to all these 9.8s that we're seeing. This is a game that I do think could rival Super Mario World for the most expensive Super Nintendo game, but I don't know if it'll ever actually exceed it. But this one is my guess for the other most important Super Nintendo game. So now here's one I do want to talk about, and this is just below the $100,000 threshold here, sold for $96,000. This is a Pokemon Blue Red text first production. That's what Heritage is calling it anyway. This should be a de facto first print of Pokemon Blue. On the back of the box, you can see it says, collect up to 139 different Pokemon playing the Red version. This is the text that belongs on the Red version box. This is a misprint, this is a typo, it is supposed to say playing the Blue version right there. From personal market watching and personal experience, finding this misprint box, even as a complete in box, is quite difficult. The sealed population on this game will be extremely low once population reports come out. But this is one that I was waiting to come up for auction for quite a while, so I am impressed by the $96,000 price tag, but I am also a bit let down that Pokemon Red still outsold it. We'll see what the future holds for this red text version of Pokemon Blue. So just coming down a little bit now. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, $84,000. Super Mario Land, $84,000. This is a green screenshots version, which is why it sold for so much in only a 9.0 A+ condition. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out again in better condition than the one up here, but again, I was talking about revisions. This one is a round seal. This one is an oval seal. It is very, very important when we talk about print runs. That is one of the major variants on NES games. Perhaps this one will seem a little bit surprising to you if you are not a Game Boy collector. Tetris on the Game Boy is the same deal as Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo. This was a pack-in with the console, so no one needed to buy the standalone version. Therefore, the standalone version didn't sell that many copies, they didn't produce that many copies, and finding a sealed one now, today, is quite difficult. Tetris is obviously one of the most iconic games ever made. Honestly, $78,000 for this, I see this being a good growth game for the future. This is one where I'm like, wow, $78,000 might actually be cheap. As stupid as that sounds. If you're a Sega collector, here is the most expensive Sega game that sold in this auction. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Hyperstone Heist. 9.6 A+ condition, absolutely beautiful for a Genesis game. It has always been one of the most sought after Genesis games and hard to find in any condition, really. Finding a mint one in perfect condition is a tall order. If Sega and Genesis were more collected, had more mainstream appeal, this game would be rivaling the Super Nintendo grails, but Sonic, I think, is the only game that really will rival these Nintendo Grail pieces. But this is one I'm going to keep an eye on, and I do expect it to do very well moving forward into the future as well. Revisions again, right? Here's the late print Legend of Zelda in the same condition as the early print, and it sold for $820,000 less. Learn your prints, learn your revisions. They matter a lot with NES. This is another one that I was personally waiting to see come up for auction. This is Super Mario RPG, 9.8 A+ condition. This is the Made in Japan version as well. There is a Made in Mexico version on this game. Seeing it sell for only $45,000 when these other Super Nintendo games are fetching $50,000, $100,000, $200,000. It's a little bit hard to rationalize. Super Mario RPG has always been a little bit easier factory sealed, but I don't really think that has anything to do with it. I think Mario RPG just doesn't have the same kind of notoriety, which to me is surprising. I think this is one of the most important games on the Super Nintendo, but maybe I'm just biased because I love the game. Coming down a little bit further, we saw Battletoads 9.4 A++ join the Elite NES games. I thought this was a super strong sale for Battletoads at $38K. Again, I don't believe there's any revision on Battletoads, so as long as you don't buy the shitty PAL version, which is super available and super common, then you have yourself a first print Battletoads. I'm super interested to see what a perfect one of this game would sell for. Final Fantasy II on Super Nintendo only selling for $38,000. This has largely always been thought of as a grail, much like Final Fantasy III has been, so seeing this one undersell FF3 for so much was a little bit surprising. In case you had any doubt as to what the most expensive original Xbox game is, It is Halo. By a lot. There is no game on the original Xbox that is even going to come close to selling for as much as Halo did here at $31,000. It is the pinnacle of original Xbox. Hopefully you got a copy back when it only cost like 500 bucks. All I know is that I am sad that I did not. Perhaps kind of funny, on the same weekend we see an 8.5 A+ Super Mario 64 sell for $31,000. So we're talking about a literal $1.5 million condition premium. Just something to consider. Remember when I was saying Link to the Past would rival Super Mario World? I actually do think that a perfect condition Chrono Trigger could also push $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 on Super Nintendo. Easily one of the most iconic games here. This is an 8.5 A+ that sold for almost $30,000. The sky is the limit on a perfect one of these. And perhaps when I told you guys to make a guess as to what games might rival it, you might have said Super Metroid as well, right? And here's a 9.4 A+ that only sold for $26,000. Now, I don't know why Super Metroid isn't also close to $100,000, just like Link to the Past and Final Fantasy III. I'm not sure why Super Metroid lags behind so much. I don't think it's all that common to find sealed. I don't think it has anything to do with that. Just doesn't get the same amount of love, I guess. We talked about the misprint version of Pokemon Blue, so you can see here that the misprint version did sell for $70,000 more than the non-misprint version. I'm just still surprised Charizard outsold it, and I'm going to keep saying that. Coming down a bit further again, we have Dragon Warrior 3 maintaining itself as a very expensive NES game in any condition. This is a 9.2A. We have Donkey Kong Country, perhaps you could say undervalued as well, not seeing the same kind of premiums as some of those other Super Nintendo games. Kirby's Dream Land, 9.6 A++, the first appearance of Kirby. Makes perfect sense as to why this sold for $24,000. You might even be able to say that this was a deal. And here we go again, right? We see just how large the condition premium is. This is a 9.4 A+ that only sold for $22,000, while the 9.8 A++ sold for 10 times as much. It's very hard to predict how large those premiums are going to be, especially when you're at an open auction. And this one here is actually a little bit surprising to me, that a perfect condition Majora's Mask Collector's Edition is only $19,200. Majora's Mask does exist in higher quantity than some of the other great N64 titles, but I did expect this one to be more in the 30, 40, 50 range, especially if we're seeing Perfect Mario 64 sell for $1 million, Perfect Condition Ocarina of Time sell for $200,000, Smash Bros selling for $144,000. I just expected Majora's to get a little bit more of a boost. Obviously, if you look at my background, I have Majora's Mask statue, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but hey, that's my opinion on this one. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, the first one of that game, incredibly iconic franchise, sold for $16,800 at this auction, which that one took me by surprise. But after talking with a couple of people, apparently finding first print Tony Hawk's factory sealed has always been decently difficult, and you have a near perfect condition copy right here, so pretty cool to see though. I love the Tony Hawk games. And tying Tony Hawk at $16,800 is a first print of God of War, which actually becomes the most expensive PlayStation 2 game ever sold at $16,800. This is the peak of PlayStation 2 collecting. This is the pinnacle. God of War, baby. And boy, do I have regrets about not grabbing a copy of this game when they were dime a dozen. Here we have Mario Kart 64 in 7.0A condition, which is actually pretty low, all things considered, selling for $14,400. That price tells me that once we see a perfect copy of this come to auction, get ready for headlines because it is gonna blow the place up. So here's another fun one. While everyone's talking about the Mario 64 headlines and the Legend of Zelda headlines, very quietly, a first print perfect copy of Gears of War sells for $14,400. It's really easy to point to the Mario 64 and be like, oh, that price is ridiculous, that's not justified. But how justified is $14,000 on an Xbox 360 game? That's pretty crazy. I don't personally follow Xbox 360 that much, so I can't say how difficult it is or how difficult it has been to obtain a first print Gears of War. Really interested to see how this one grows over the years. This sale right here for a Mega Man Dr. Wright version is pretty crazy to see, because this is actually a complete in-box game. This is not factory sealed. So since the factory sealed version of this game is so out of reach for almost every collector, we see the complete in-box version starting to really take off in price. This is a pattern that might continue itself as we move forward if the price of the factory sealed versions continue to rise exponentially. Complete in-box will probably become the next best alternative for a lot of collectors. And right beside the Mega Man, we see it again here with a matte sticker Super Mario Bros, where finding a sealed one is literally impossible, so we see the complete in-box one selling for $9,900. And that's only for a 6.0 condition. We can see there is another Final Fantasy VII here. This is a first print 9.6B+, and the B plus on this game really does hurt, which is why the price is so much lower. And we still see a lot of popular titles here as we scroll downwards. Mortal Kombat here was still the 9.8 A plus, but it's a Game Boy version of the game, which is obviously not the most desirable version. The Super Nintendo version would outsell it by a lot. It's kind of nice to see a game like Rockin' Cats still sell for $7,800. This is one of those old school rare NES games that used to be one of the most expensive sealed games. If you're curious about Kingdom Hearts on PS2, here's a 9.8 A plus selling for $7,800. Maybe if it was a 9.8 A plus plus, we would see it rival God of War more. Not really sure on that though. If you can think of a PS2 game that's going to compete with God of War, let me know down below. And if you're still watching the video at this point, thanks, I appreciate it. Make sure to hit the like button, and if you like the content, make sure to subscribe too. Here we see a complete in box 9.4 Chrono Trigger sell for $7,200. Getting a 9.4 sealed would be $50,000 plus. So you can see that if you still want a beautiful Chrono Trigger, you might have to go down to complete in box. Is $7,200 too much to pay for a complete in box? Maybe. We're really gonna have to see what happens in the future with the price of sealed versus the price of complete in box games. As we keep coming down, we can see a GameCube game finally here for $7,200 on a Mario Sunshine. This one was a bit surprising to me, seeing Futurama on the Xbox sell for $6,000. I know it's a rare game and everything, but I just didn't expect there to be this level of demand for Futurama sealed. And here actually we have two Player's Choice sales, a GoldenEye 9.4 A plus and a Mario Kart 64 9.6 A plus plus. And both of them sold for $6,000. I think people are realizing that getting an original print of games like this is going to be near impossible, so at least you can get a mint condition Player's Choice copy. It's really going to be interesting to see if people go for Player's Choice copies more than they go for original print, high grade, complete in box copies. That's going to be the real decider there. Are people going to prefer sealed still, but Player's Choice, or not sealed and original print? Here we go again with original Xbox games, a near perfect Morrowind selling for $5,500. Keep your eyes peeled for this one. We also have another super strong sale on Minecraft for Xbox 360 selling for $5,500. And for people wondering, hey, where are all the rare games? Don't they ever come up for auction? Here's Panzer Dragoon Saga 9.0 A selling for $5,200. Kind of underwhelming all things considered. I'm pretty sure a few years ago buying a copy of this game would have been like $1,000 to $2,000. Given how much everything else has appreciated in value, a game like Panzer Dragoon Saga has really been left behind. For a good relative comparison, here's Futurama on PS2 almost outselling Panzer Dragoon Saga. What a world we live in, hey? Here's another real gem for you true collectors. A 9.4 B plus Kyo Flying Squadron only selling for $4,500. So we have a game here that might have like 10 to 20 total sealed copies out there in any condition, selling for $4,500 because it turns out that demand is far more important than rarity when we're talking about collectibles. Or at bare minimum, it is equally as important. And coming down, we have some big love for Digimon World selling for $4,500, 9.4 A plus. And also over here on Xbox 360 again, we have the original Left 4 Dead selling for $4,500. And that honestly just blows my mind. Like that is insane to me to think that you could either have a Pokemon Fire Red with adapter, or you could have a copy of Left 4 Dead. It's insane to me. I have to mention Final Fantasy VIII since it is one of my favorite all-time games. Despite the super strong Final Fantasy VII sale, Final Fantasy VIII unfortunately did not get dragged up with it. I'll have to hold on to mine for a little bit longer before I can cash out for $100,000, I guess. As we move down, we have a little bit more GameCube love here. A Twilight Princess selling for $3,800. This has always been one of the more sought-after GameCube titles as it was a super late release and not a lot of people bought it actually. It's one of the games that has that storyline. So seeing it as one of the more expensive games does make sense. This is one that people have been chasing after for years. Not surprised to see where it is now. But again, I am kind of surprised to see Left 4 Dead Xbox 360 outselling it. It's a lot of little relative analysis. It's super easy to look at the market and be like, oh, these prices are stupid, everything's overpriced. But it's way more interesting to see what is going up at what rates versus other games. That's far more interesting, right? Like here's the original Medal of Honor in 9.8 condition selling for $3,800. Who would have thought? As we keep moving down, we move into more unpopular titles or lower grade games. Here again, we have Snatcher, only selling for $3,000. No one really cares. Here again is only a complete in box Secret of Mana, but it is super high grade, selling for almost $3,000. This is a game that would be extremely expensive, again, in factory sealed form, especially in this high of grade. For all of the Final Fantasy fans, FFX still isn't super expensive, at least only in 9.6 grade. I am curious what a 9.8 A++ would sell for. This is probably my second favorite game in the Final Fantasy series. Absolutely love Final Fantasy X. I actually do love talking about these collector's games, so I'm going to keep pointing them out to you guys. Here's Gotcha Force in near perfect condition. This is a 9.6 A++, only selling for $2,000. If you've been collecting GameCube for a while, then you're familiar with Gotcha Force and you know that it is one of the most expensive complete in box games, but that does not at all translate over to factory sealed collecting, which is kind of interesting to look at. And as we are down in this point now, there are far too many auctions for me to go over every single one of them. So just know I'm just going to be pointing out interesting sales at this point. You can log on to heritageauctions.com, make an account there, and you can browse all of the auction sales yourself if you want to see what was selling for the sub 5,000 and around there. There were almost 500 games in this auction, so there's a lot of stuff to look at and see what the market thinks of certain games. Here's another very key Xbox 360 game, Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. This is the first print, which actually has a T rating in the bottom left-hand corner. If this is only a 9.4A selling for $1,400, I have to assume that if this game came up in 9.8 A++, we'd probably be talking in that $5,000 to $10,000 range. Also very cool to see Shadow of Colossus getting so much love. This is a 9.6 A+ selling for $1,400. Very cool game. Cool to see it being appreciated as a collectible. You can see we have a little bit more Xbox selection. We have Red Dead Redemption in 9.0A selling for only $384. And at the very bottom, we have Motor Tune Grand Prix 9.6 A+ selling for only $216, which honestly, if you're a PlayStation collector, this is a great price for this game. This is just not at all the type of game that would perform at Heritage auctions. You'd undoubtedly do better just putting this on eBay. And with all of that said, with all of this analysis, with all of these prices and craziness and all of this done, some of these purchases are going to be great purchases and some of these will be bad. If you're looking to enter into the market, contain your FOMO the best you can. I know it can be very exciting to see all these prices and think, oh my god, if I buy a sealed game right now, I will be a millionaire in a few years. Likely won't happen like that. I do believe in the future of graded games, but just temper your expectations and be responsible about your purchasing. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, make sure to put them below. I will respond and get back to you. Thank you for watching this analysis, and I'll see you guys next time.